Hello, world. Welcome to the Speed Strength Show. I'm Tommy.
I'm Navio.
And I'm Braden. And are Lightning McQueen's tires his arms and legs or his hands and feet?
Oh, first off, can I just say the fact that you're using something from Cars, very happy about that. One of my favorite movies.
I
Great
thought
film.
I thought both of you guys might appreciate that, being motorsport fanatics.
So to answer your actual question before I got distracted by Cars, in the context of the movie, I would say yes, because
Which
the
one?
animations of the cars, they try to use the wheels almost in arm and leg type fashion. You see them move their front wheels with expressions the same way, I talk with my hands type thing. So in the context of the movie, I would say yes. In real life, maybe legs, but not arms, because I would treat the car as a quadruped creature rather than a bipedal creature.
Mm, yeah, I think I agree too. I think I agree.
Okay, so we're going. So just to clarify, I was asking arms and legs or hands and feet. So if you're both saying that they have arms and legs, do you think that Lightning McQueen slash the other vehicles slash people in the movie,
We don't know what
uh,
they are.
yeah, do they have hands and feet? Would you maybe say that the tread is their hands and feet?
I think that's what I was going to go with. I think the rim and the axle, I guess, right? Like that would be the arm or the femur
Like the long
tibia.
bone part of your, yeah.
Yeah, and then the tread itself is probably like the paws of this quadruped.
Yeah, I do like thinking about it as a quadruped. I think that makes a lot of sense too.
Yeah, like I said, in the animation, I think they tried to personify is not the right word, but um, give
Is
like
it
these human
anthropomorphize?
characteristics
Hmm.
Is that the word?
to, sorry.
Yeah, yeah,
Anthropomorphize. It's like when you take inanimate
Oh,
objects and
that's a
you
PhD word.
speak about it or try to make it in like animal ways.
Yeah, I was gonna say they try to bring to life the mechanical parts of the car, give like human characteristics to the car, which, like I said, I feel like they did really well with the front wheels. Every time they talk, they move and say something, they move the wheels the same way a human might move their hands. So,
hmm.
which I think is part of the fun of those movies.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think they do a great job of it. Now I'm just kind of thinking, which the tow truck? What's that guy's name?
Mater.
Mater. I'm pretty sure he can like control where his hook thing goes. Is that like a tail, maybe?
I don't know.
Scorpion. Scorpions control their tails, right?
Yeah,
So
oh
it's like
yeah,
a
for
part of
sure.
the body situation.
Yeah, there you go. That's interesting. Hmm.
I'm assuming both of you have seen Cars.
Hmm.
Yeah, my
Okay.
brother and I did a Cars marathon
Oh,
a few
nice.
months ago.
Nav, have you gone back and watched Cars since you've watched Formula One?
No, should I?
There's some things in there, yeah,
Hmm.
that I
Like
think you probably wouldn't have recognized before that you might recognize now, or even voices that you may recognize now.
no. Okay. All right. I shouldn't look at the credits then because then I know I should just kind
You
of
could try
watch
to
and
get eventually look at the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
credits, but you should try
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
guess.
Okay. Yeah, because I got into it so recently that I haven't revisited anything like that. Because the last time I saw Cars, I'm gonna say over 10 years ago, right? The first one came out probably
What,
like,
2005?
oh yeah,
I think, yeah, the first one was like
I'm in
way
high
back.
school. Yeah.
So, but yeah, you should go back and
Interesting.
watch because there's some, at least from the F1 side, there's some interesting people. There's
Yeah, yeah,
other famous racing people that I wouldn't be spoiling anything for you.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, they did a really good job with bringing actual motorsport people in to do some of the voices or
Hmm.
small little cameo voice appearances
Yeah.
that I think you would appreciate.
I think that's interesting. I don't know where on like timeline of film history this probably mattered, but I feel like in recent times, there is a finer appreciation for the blend of art and reality. So, in this case of the Cars movie, you have actual racing drivers. And it's just a cartoon movie, but there's like you appreciate more knowing that they try to at least make it like more real. Or John Wick, people love that movie because Keanu Reeves actually trained to be John Wick, and you go, wow, like I'm on board with this movie. But I don't know if you go back 70s, 80s, it's just like people pretending to be very, very badass, and you bought it because it was on screen. But now I think looking back, it's like that was so hokey. Like I bet you they could have found someone else better who was more actually qualified to go do something, and you bought it anyways when it wasn't. And now it's like, no, if you don't kind of do your own stunts, or if you don't, how could you have a Cars movie without, I'm guessing, let's say Lewis Hamilton, he's not in it. It's like, really, like you didn't try to at least bring someone real to make this a little bit more believable.
That's a good point. I've never thought about it that way, but I mean, when you read about or you hear about like actors training for a specific role, that's always really like, good for you type stuff. Um, Whenever you see that a movie was based on a true story or like inspired by true events or whatever, then like I like the story already, but now it's like, wow, that actually happened. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Or
And stuff
even
like
when
that.
if they do a real story, when they try to bring family or somebody,
Mhm.
or if the person that the story's about, if they're still alive, to say, hey, can you verify like how accurate, how real does this movie portray what actually happened? And they go, yeah, okay, you did a really good job with that. I give it the stamp of approval, because then there's a little bit more authenticity. It wasn't like a real Hollywood botch job where they took the story and they blew it up into something it really wasn't.
Yeah, I think there was a movie that I watched a couple of years ago that it was some military based movie anyway, and it was about these three veterans, and like I think they might have actually been the actors in the movie.
Oh, was that the Paris 315 or whatever that movie was about the
Maybe,
train in Paris?
maybe I don't remember. This is the only fact I remember about it. I did enjoy the movie though.
Okay, because I think there was some movie about like a train hijacking in Paris, and there happened to be three like off-duty U.S. Marines or whatever that were on the train,
Mm,
and then stopped whoever was hijacking the train. But for the actual movie that they made about it, it was it was the three real life individuals. I
mm.
think that they basically played themselves, which again is kind of like Nav said, that's kind of cool, where you
Yeah.
like really immersify yourself into the role. Can't do much better than playing yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, I'll see
Yeah.
if I
Or
can
remember
find that.
like there was I don't know if it's the most recent Mission Impossible movie or one before, but there was a scene where Tom Cruise is jumping between buildings, and right before the movie came out, he had a clip came out where he was, as he was landing on the second building, his foot broke because he landed essentially foot on the wall of the building.
Ooh.
So there's major flexion in the ankle. His foot did break, but you can see him still kind of limp running because it was like a chase scene. So he like finished off the scene and ever knew his foot broke. So when I was in the theater and that scene happened, the entire theater went, oh, when that happened, because everyone knew that he had actually broken his foot. So there's like that, blend of reality and film that you just appreciate so much more from a person who does his own stunts, or knowing that like that really did happen. And you value it more. Whereas like you look at like, I don't know, like Kung Fu, David Carradine, it's like so hokey, but that was a cool movie, a show. Like people love that, but that would not pass now. Like I would, anything like that doesn't seem as interesting now because you kind of see through the bullshit or the lie. Whereas now it's like I would rather you make it real for me, and at least it's believable. Maybe because CGI is too fake, that it goes too far, that we just want something kind of smack in the middle or closer to reality.
One thing Nav might be able to help us with though is shedding light and making reality how we can use all this psych stuff. Because for us, I think I speak for Braden as well. We don't know this stuff as well as you, and you've spent a lot of time looking at all these cool and interesting concepts and constructs and methods around how the human brain works. And we think this could be really applicable in coaching. And we had a great conversation last time. Excited for you to come back for part 2. So yeah, like let's get into it. Let's start to pick your brain on how can we actually use this stuff in our coaching. And Braden, you had a good question, I think, to open up with.
Well, yeah, it was kind of like a two-parter where we both kind of lined up. We talked about the two major predictors of job performance being conscientiousness and intelligence. And Tommy, you wanted to learn how to identify those things in people, which could apply to like a recruiting, like coaches underneath you or coaches for whatever team, potentially athletes as well. And then I wanted to know how to develop those qualities, and if you can help anybody develop those qualities, they'll be better suited for, you know, whatever sport or job or anything that you're going forward to it. Because I mean, as strength and conditioning coaches, we have an influence on much more than just strength and conditioning.
More than sets and reps,
That's
despite
right.
what people think.
Yeah, those are really good questions. And I think those are ones that people think of a lot too, right? One is on just figuring out how you can even measure it in a way that's reliable, actually valid. And then, of course, in sports performance in general, where you start is important, obviously, but knowing how can we improve upon what we do have or where we're starting is a great question. And I think a little bit on maybe the disappointing side is on the development piece. I don't think there's a lot of good research to show like enduring changes in any of these things. But just to share some, initial research, I'm not an expert by any means on intelligence research or even personality, but I understand it a little bit more in terms of its application in selection or development in the context of the workplace. So at least on the development side of intelligence, I've seen research showing that there seems to be some general population level changes in intelligence. So for example, there's an effect called the Flynn effect. So when you do an IQ test, it is standardized where average is 100. And so if you are an average level of intelligence, you're going to be scoring 100 in IQ, whether or not you were testing in the 80s or if you're testing in 2020. However, there seems to be an effect where average population level intelligence has improved over the course of this 30-year period or 40-year period from the 80s to the 20s. And it can be attributed to things like better access to education, nutrition, probably just education as well. So the score of 100 stays the same, but what it actually means means a little bit different. So obviously you're seeing a general trend in the development of intelligence. You also see research like kids who are adopted compared to their siblings who have stayed in the home country and were not adopted. Those who were adopted, their high IQ level is higher as well. So you see these kind of general changes. But at the same time, intelligence is highly heritable. If you're looking at a scale of 0 to 1, 0 being not heritable at all, 1 being totally heritable, intelligence is at like 0.8 versus something like depression, which is highly heritable. I think the estimate is somewhere around 0.4 or 0.6. So like, it's highly, highly heritable. And you'll see that if, you and I measure our IQ at 9 and we are average, if we test our IQ at 90, we're probably average as well. So it seems to look like intelligence is fairly consistent, but it doesn't mean that you don't do things or you can't do things to at least try and use what you have to the extent that you can, or to, slow the decline of how people's brains function as they age, which is a natural process in cognitive decline. So you'll see that older adults now in this generation have experienced slower cognitive decline relative to older adults, maybe from 20 or 30 years ago, because of smartphones, and they're actually stimulating the brains all the time. So that's kind of interesting. So I see apps like, these are brain games, work on these. I don't know the evidence about those apps or activities specifically, but at least it's, using what you've been given or to try and slow the decline. But it seems like intelligence is fairly stable. Not to say that you can't work on it a little bit. So that's actually, evidence for selecting it. If it's fairly stable, then, looking who has what and more or less of it is a good way to increase your odds of predicting job performance. So I think that that's evidence that it's not a bad idea to assess and look for it. Whether or not that's the only piece of evidence you use, I would definitely disagree. Look at the whole picture, look at things that matter more, right? But on the intelligence side, it is something that we think we should assess based on the research. On the personality side, you'll tend to see that there's what's called a maturity principle. So as people age or mature, they tend to be more conscientious. They tend to be a little bit more extroverted, more agreeable, and less neurotic or more emotionally stable. And I'm sure you and I can, think of friends or think of ourselves where like, yeah, when I was, 14, I don't think that was very conscientious of a behavior. And then you might think of yourself now, or if you're a little bit older, you're like, yeah, like I would never do that now. So that's like that maturity principle. That people tend to, on average, change a little bit in the quote unquote good directions. However, if we're looking at like intervention studies to try and change personality, I think same thing. One thing that's really tough about psychology research is just how enduring the changes are, or is it like a momentary prime? It's sort of like if you go to a physiotherapist or an RMT and you say, hey, I'm lacking some range of motion here, and they work on you with passive methodologies, you leave and you go, I'm moving great. And then a week later, you're like, oh, I feel tight again. So it's kind of a similar idea, right? But there might be things that you have to do kind of more consistently, and hopefully over time it's more enduring. And unfortunately, this research is really hard to do. I guess like any type of research where you're trying to track outcomes over time, the longer the time period, the more robust your findings are and the more confident you are. But it's tough to have the same individual come into your lab or make the time to sign up and have a conversation online and see where it goes. But there is research to show that sometimes there are these changes in personality. How long, we're not really sure. And often what you'll see is changes tend to happen on the ends of a normal distribution, meaning we tend to experience or display a variety of behaviors that could be low in conscientiousness or high. What we most typically engage in is what people would, tend to say, that's my level of personality on this particular trait. But there are moments where you do really conscientious things and moments that maybe you won't do a lot of conscientious things. And these intervention types of studies tend to change the peaks a little bit so that you might do less of the bad stuff. But for how long, we don't know exactly. So again, there seems to be a bit of this stability stuff. Even in children, there's something called attachment styles, which is how kids seem to be connected with their caretakers. And if I remember correctly, there are like 3 types. I don't remember exactly the names, but I can kind of show you the behaviors that they engage in. So a typical study, a kid and a mom or a parent goes into a lab. The two are interacting. I believe a researcher will come into the room who's a stranger to the kid, and then the parent will leave or walk away. And you kind of see how the kid reacts because there's a stranger in the room. And then ultimately the mom comes back, and you're also seeing how the kid reacts to the mom now that the mom is back. And I think the 3 general types are, it's definitely called secure attachment is one of them, where when the mom leaves, I think the kid cries. So that's, they're securely attached because they miss the thing that's comforting. And then after a while, they acclimate and they're kind of chill and cool with the researcher. And then when the mom comes back, it's all good. There are other kids who, when the mom leaves, they're hysterical, like they're just so upset. And I think they never get consoled again until I think the parent comes back. And then there's like a third type where when the mom leaves, the kid doesn't react at all. Like they're just like, whatever. And depending on these types of attachment styles, it can actually meaningfully predict what type of personality they are in later life. Again, pointing to a level of consistency. And so again, that's evidence for selecting for it's probably pretty good because it's actually kind of consistent. And yet at the same time, it is incredibly unsatisfying to say, well, you can't really develop it. So I don't want to say, hey, you can't change your personality, but there's an element of stability that's kind of there. And I see parallels with it in sports. Like I would imagine there are certain athletes who just have better ratio of femur length to torso length. Longer torso, shorter femur is good for weightlifting. And I'd probably select on that if I'm looking for top tier athletes. At the same time, is that it? And if you have a long torso and short femur, that I don't want to hire you? Well, not necessarily. There's all these other things to consider. And it's important to get the full picture, but it doesn't mean that you neglect this very important piece of data point if you know that it might actually meaningfully help you predict or at least help you with making a decision. So I hope that captures a little bit on the development side, and it's again unsatisfying because it seems like it depends, which is not what you necessarily want to hear when you're looking for some recommendations.
We say it depends all the time, as long as there's an answer that goes with it, which you provided an answer. One thing that might be interesting, like to expand on Braden's question, but how do you develop this? Like you said, Nav, there might be a level of consistency or stability in these, traits or abilities that people have. And I'm wondering, is it something, maybe like speed or strength or things like that, where somebody brings in a floor and a ceiling? That range that somebody has might be higher or lower than someone else based on the talent level they have, but doesn't mean we don't try to make people stronger. Doesn't mean we don't try to make people faster. Does this maybe justify, like if you're a coach or you work with athletes or you work with other coaches, whatever, should you have maybe this student of the game mentality where you try to bring things in to make people aware of how to be conscientious? Conscientious. I can't even say it now. Be nice to people, or ways to improve intelligence. And if you had like weekly staff meetings or team meetings where someone comes in and talks about this, or you share some of these ideas, that at least if you can push the floor up, you may not change their ceiling, but you can push the floor up. Do you think that's maybe a more feasible way for people to go about developing this?
Yeah, I think a couple things there. The first thing that came to mind when you're talking about floor and ceiling, I think this is a byproduct of scientific inquiry. You're looking at very hopefully specific, direct causal link between your independent variable and your dependent variable. So conscientiousness predicts job performance. And that's to try and show how much impact this variable actually has an influence on the thing you're trying to predict. But nothing in life is so much in a vacuum. And same thing with psychological research. What about other variables that might contribute to the extent to which someone will develop or change? So some things that are related to what you're talking about is a goal orientation, which is generally an underlying motivation for why people engage in the behaviors that they do. There are a couple of dimensions. They exist on a continuum, and you can have you can score high on all of these. But one dimension is a performance orientation. So people who score higher in this dimension tend to do things because they want to show to others how much they know. Context is very important. So in competitive sports, if you're at the Olympics, that is a performance context. You are solely there in that moment to perform well, or a final exam. we're trying to show how well you can score in this test. A learning orientation is you do things because you want to learn and you want to master the skill. And you can see that you can score higher on both. Like even in the context of the Olympics, you can go there and try to perform as well as you can, win a gold or not do well. But if you are also high on your learning orientation, you see that you can take those experiences and learn from them, develop some sort of mastery over this high level international competition that you've never seen before, and take it into your next world championships, into your next Olympics. So you can score high on both. So it might be an interesting question of what is the impact of someone who is high on conscientiousness and high on learning orientation. And would that person develop the most on a skill in a given context?
That kind of reminds me. I've heard of people being like competition motivated or process motivated or driven was maybe the word that was used. And if you can, like, I guess it would be for someone who's process driven, it would be easy to go through a time like this where there isn't competitions on the horizon. You just focus on yourself and you're in the dark room and you're, grinding away, getting better. That kind of, to me, parallels with the learning focus or learn that you were just describing. And then the competition would be, they would have a really tough time right now. If there's nothing to train for, then what's the point? And that kind of seems like it parallels with the like, what was the word you used? Sorry.
It's learning orientation for what I think is process, and then performance for probably the outcome. Yeah.
So that I think it's definitely, it matters how the situation is set up that's going to influence people's motivation to try and learn or try to become more conscientious or try to become more intelligent or whatever. But I think it's a good point to bring up that there's more factors involved than just where their baseline is and that sort of thing, that there's abilities to learn and like willingness to learn or willingness to improve. I like what you were saying before too about how like as time goes on, we've gotten more intelligent as a society, and even like you see people that are born in one place and adopted to another place that are more or less intelligent, but probably closer to the average of that new place that they're living in. So that to me says like the environment that you're in has a huge impact, but maybe if whatever intelligence you measure when you're really young is the same, like relative to the population is the same when you're really old, maybe that means that you do the majority of that environmental developing when you're really young before it's been measured. I don't know.
Yeah. And there's also this idea of like gene environment interaction, especially in the context of intelligence. You find that those who have more intelligence tend to seek out environments and activities that will stimulate their brain, or in some sense maybe develop it or at least maintain, more so than those who are less intelligent. So it's yet another example of the rich get richer, which you can find in literally countless examples. But in this one, same thing. And so those who are smart will kind of do more of these things. But what I think we can do as those who are coaches or just in truly the business of helping people improve upon themselves, like that's got to be the biggest struggle as a coach is, there and even in these things, and I know we can get into selection yet in terms of how, and I think we definitely should, but typically what it looks like is you have standardized tests that were scientifically validated, and you have people go through this assessment. Their score means nothing without a comparison to a group norm. Just even in any other type of fitness test, if I tell you I have a 40-inch vertical, what does that mean? Well, you only know it's good because generally people aren't jumping 40 inches. But let's say in a selection context, everyone in this combine has a 50-inch vert. Well, then now my 40-inch isn't that great. Sorry, I'm gonna get dropped. So you need to have, a comparison group. And so when you have these comparison groups, it helps you dictate, at least in your given sample, who is more or less likely to succeed. And that's ultimately what we're trying to go for here. But just because someone doesn't get selected given this sample or given those situations doesn't mean that they can still try and improve upon themselves. And another thing that's related to that learning orientation is research coming out of a developmental psychologist. Her name's Carol Dweck. And she either studied it in the context of academic achievement in general or about math ability. And if kids have an entity perspective, which is things are as they are and it's fixed, they don't learn or do as well on math tests or in these academic settings relative to people who have this incremental mindset, which is this growth or development mindset. And she'll say that, one of the most powerful things you can say to a child is not yet. As in, if, they come to you and say they don't have a good grade on a test, you say, yeah, not yet. And even if they do get a good grade, you're not trying to highlight that, hey, you're so smart. You want to highlight the behaviors that led to that outcome. So similar to Braden, what you said around there's some people who are kind of competition driven versus like process driven. What this research is showing is really highlight the process, because there are tons of things that you can't control, because some tests are difficult. Some days, are worse than others due to no fault of your own. But there are things that you can put in terms of effort to change. Maybe I can start studying a little bit earlier. I guess maybe we see it in our field around like lifting, people who cut weight way too late. It's like, hey, now next time maybe I should have started a little bit earlier. I am someone who likes a cup, maybe a refeed every week. That is who I am. I don't want to change that. And maybe that means we need a lot more time for that because it might slow you down a little bit. Hey, good to know. But we're trying to highlight everything you're doing that's right, as opposed to like, oh, I'm just someone who's lazy. If I weren't so lazy, I would have made weight. Well, that's a huge blanket statement that, one is an overgeneralization, probably incredibly catastrophic, like you're just pushing it to an extreme, and it doesn't help identify what things you can change. Like, so stop being lazy, then I can make weight. I don't really understand what that means. So now you think about to your children, hey, well, if you're not smart, that's why you got a bad grade. So like, be smart means I get the grade. That doesn't help me at all. But if you're highlighting, hey, these are the process things you can do, I think that might tie into what we talked about last week on setting difficult, specific goals. I think being not lazy is a very difficult goal, but it's highly unspecific, right? But to be able to highlight something specific in the process, that helps highlight or reinforce or develop that growth mindset. And I think that would get at what you guys talk about in terms of being a student of the game. And I speculate, on average, if you take a group of athletes, be it at a college level, and you assess their learning orientation, I think they would be significantly higher than a general population on learning orientation. Just because I think through the process of going through something so difficult and for doing it so long, hopefully with good coaches along the way, they have experienced concretely and firsthand what things they need to do that they can change, that they have witnessed make a difference in terms of improvements in their performance. And it all was attributed to things they can control, or that, a loss in one day can actually lead to a win in another day, or a learning opportunity in another day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. I really like that idea of highlighting the process and highlighting the things that are within your control, and the fact that your performance is to some extent anyway within your control. That reminds me, my brother told me a little while ago that certain languages, the way that the grammar works or whatever, instead of like in English, we would say something like the bed is soft. Like that's just something that the bed is, and it's a constant thing that's not going to change. But in other languages, if you translate it word for word, it would be more like the bed is doing soft, like it's acting soft. And that's something that, and it would work the same way with people. Like you wouldn't say like you are, I don't know, like you are lazy, for example. You mentioned that you are a lazy person. That's something you can't change. It's you are acting lazy. That's something that you can change. You're choosing to do it now, but you can choose to do or not do it. But yeah, I like that in just because I think if you highlight that for coaches or athletes, it just gives them more responsibility. Their training means more, their learning means more. They will believe, I think, that if they try to improve, that they will improve, because that's how it works. And that's also kind of, I was talking to my dad after the last conversation that we had about the goal setting stuff that you mentioned, or sorry, it was the feedback stuff that you mentioned, the positive and negative feedback. And the conclusion that we came to together was whatever feedback you can give to somebody to help them believe in themselves more might be the most effective. So for someone who's not very confident in themselves, saying you're doing the right stuff, you're doing well, and like doing this stuff will help you get to where you want to go, then that's great. For someone who is very confident in themselves and they feel like they can take on a challenge, then saying something like, if you change this thing, then you'll be set. Or if you work on this thing, or like add this drill in or whatever, then you'll be on the right track. Then they're like, okay, great. I'm super confident I can nail that drill. I can focus on this cue or whatever. And then now they believe in themselves more because they believe they can tackle that challenge, and that challenge will lead to improved success. So yeah, those things just kind of came to mind.
Yeah, like when you mentioned feedback, I think highlighting discrepancies between where someone is and where they want to go is the point of feedback. But for those who are, a little bit insecure or unconfident, what you can really do actually is normalize that experience. That's actually one of the most powerful things that psychologists do when they see a client who's going through therapy, because oftentimes they think they're the only ones going through a struggle. And they have found, and the brain is incredibly powerful, but it's incredibly tricky and devious if you can't manage those thoughts, and we all have them. And so what a therapist will try to do, or what a coach can try to do, is to say, hey, this struggle you're on right now, there's actually tons of people who are going through this. Or it is completely normal to feel unconfident if I gave you an exercise to do last week and you weren't able to hit it. But let's dissect why that might be. Was it lack of sleep? Didn't get enough nutrition that day? Rough couple weeks, rough year and a half with a pandemic, like things that objectively will impact your performance that may not be inside your control, may be those that you can control. You try and work on those. And just to highlight that lots of people don't hit PRs, or in weightlifting, you only see the makes, but you don't see any of the misses. I think in 2013, I did I mentioned it last time. I did a photo shoot, right? 7-week cut. And along that journey, what I remembered the most was a quote I saw that said, the reason we struggle with insecurity is because we compare our highlight reel. The reason we struggle with insecurity is because we compare our behind the scenes with other people's highlight reel. And you only see the makes. I follow weightlifters. All I see is them, snatching 170 kilos and, clean and jerk 200. I don't see the massages. I don't see the up at 6 o'clock just to do squats to get a massage and a nap and then do another session at 11 and then another session at 3. I don't see all the pain. I don't see the misses. I only see the 6 lifts on the Olympic stage. That's the highlight reel of them. But I have all the context to my struggle. I have I have to work and I got to make this thing and I got to go and lift and everything's achy. My knees crack. I'm sure all their joints crack too. But all you see is the perfect lift. So a coach can really normalize that by saying, hey, and there's the struggle, right? I was saying we want to improve people upon themselves, but there are ways and times at which it's good to highlight some comparison group, just briefly to highlight that you're not alone in this journey and other people are struggling too. And at least you go, okay, this is kind of par for the course here. And some athletes might require more reminding than others, but I'd say for the most part, most will require some sort of reminding.
Yeah, I have found that too, where just there's certain things that I know certain athletes need to work on, and I know it's a pretty difficult thing, and I'll remind everybody that like after the first time, this is a tough thing, so it's okay you didn't get it, or this is a tough thing, so it's really impressive that you did this well already, and then certain people obviously based off of how they respond need a lot more of that reassurance, but it is helpful for sure.
One of the things I really like that you've highlighted in the last 10 or 15 minutes, Nav, is maybe some of the things we can do right away as coaches, where you said like the language of not yet. Oh, I didn't do this yet. And like you said, even the idea of highlighting the effort if someone does get it. Hey, you did a great job doing this. And so that way you never make them feel like they've hit the ceiling. There's always another level to strive for. And so to me as a coach, like that's something now I want to try to implement in my daily practice as a coach, that I need to get into the habit of using the language not yet. Oh, you didn't get this yet. Let's keep going. Oh, you got this. That was like you did well there. What are the things you did? Let me highlight the effort. And so again, I think as coaches or anyone listening who's a sports practitioner, it's always helpful to have something kind of tangible that you can take away, because that's ultimately the point of the research and discovering knowledge, right? Is not just for it to be discovered and sit on a bookshelf somewhere, but for it to actually be put into practice. And so I think it's great that you highlighted those things, because that's something like now I'm learning and I'm going, okay, how can I start to implement that into my daily habits as a coach?
Yeah. Like another way to think about it too is the why. For me to tell you X leads to Y, like what mechanism? You hit your PR, you didn't hit your PR. Why? And you're trying to highlight the effort. That's the mechanism, right? Or you're highlighting well, you need a little bit more time. Hopefully that also necessitates effort in between, and then you will hit it, right? It's the why. Or I've seen people say, or I've seen online, like for those who say they can't run a marathon, I always ask them, like, have you tried? I'll say, well, no. So, well, then how do you know you can't run a marathon? Right? It's just like,
Can't run it yet.
why? Yeah, you can't run it yet. And difficult things take time. Difficult things don't happen overnight. I think we celebrate athletes in professional sports and in Olympics. It's like, it's so cool to see, but it's even cooler to see when you know how they got there. You're looking at, Canadian kids who have skates on when they're 2 and they can't really walk yet, to get to the point where they're, playing fluid hockey by 12. That person who's 12 years old can play hockey because they put in effort from when they were 2, age from 2 to 10, at which I didn't play hockey. It's not about me as a person not being able to because I can. It's just because I haven't tried. I didn't put in the time. So highlighting that why and the effort and where things went well and why, or just like, hey, you can't get to the bottom of a squat, not full stop. Why? Well, we're going to try and assess where there are weaknesses in your mobility, in your flexibility, in your strength, then instead of targeting the squat necessarily, we're going to target all the mechanisms in between. Work on the ankle mobility, work on understanding what a hip hinge is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We piece it all together. Now you take a look, a month down the road. Wow, I've improved. It's highlighting the mechanisms and highlighting the why and controlling those that you can, and truly easier said than done, but letting go of the things you can't control, because there's really so much you can't, and you're stressed enough as is probably on the things you can control. So why add more to your plate?
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to when you can explain the why, to do so, because especially if an athlete is really emotionally invested in their performance, then if they fail something that they think they should have succeeded and they don't know why they failed, then they're just automatically going to assume, well, I'm just not a good athlete, or I'm not good at lifting, or I didn't do enough to prepare, or whatever, which, like, depending on your relationship with it, maybe that I didn't do enough is okay, because then they might focus on the process. But um, with some athletes, I know that that's very a detrimental thing to think about. Um, so if you can explain it, then I think it does give them context and peace of mind, like where they can improve, instead of just saying, like, yeah, piling on themselves like they're a bad person or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, well, I was also going to say, like, I think the time piece is really important too, because I don't know if I say it enough to my clients, but if they have a goal, you only actually fail when you stop trying. Like if you're trying to lift 200 kilo, for example, like in your next, and you want to do it at your next meet, but at that meet you only got 190. You didn't fail, you just haven't done the 200 yet. And if you keep trying, you'll get there. Just when you've decided that you failed is when you have failed, and when you
Yeah.
decide you're done is when you have failed.
Like Rocky, awesome movie. And the reason why it's such a good movie is because the guy lost the fight and he still won the hearts and minds of the crowd. Or the scene right before the fight where he goes into the arena by himself and he's just like at the ring and he's like, oh my God. Like, I'm actually having chills thinking about the scene, but he's freaked out, and and I think there was a caretaker at the arena. He's like, go to sleep, man. Like, you have a fight tomorrow. He climbs into bed with Adrian. And she's like, and he just talks to her like, I'm so scared. Like, who am I, this kid from Philly? I don't deserve a fight with a champion. All those fears, and he still went in. That's that's the effort. That's the willingness to try. Let's give it a step. Like this one of my best friends actually is a 3.5-year-old, and she'll be like, we're like playing around a tent or something. I was like, hey, why don't you try and close this flap, like the window? She's like, I can't. I was like, well, just try. Like, it's just like your winter jacket. And she flips out and she closes. She's like, oh, I could do it. I was like, yeah. And all you did is because you tried. Like, you're 3.5. If you fine, you can't do it, I'll teach you. And now you know. Now it's a simple zipper, but when she is 3, when we were 3, that's probably the most difficult thing we ever saw. Copy that, paste that into a different scenario. Like, the only reason I can't squat 200 yet is because, yeah, I haven't tried, but I'm squatting, 100 kilos. Damn, I'm halfway there. It's pretty solid. Let's just keep going and see where I kind of go along the way. And even if I don't get to 200, at least I'm Rocky. I gave it a try. I lost, but you're going to earn some respect along the way, if not for other people, as you don't need to, but for yourself. And you're going to make some amazing friends along the way. Go to a good gym like the Pack or something, and that's a win to me. There's other things that make
Pack is
this
always a win.
endeavor. It's always a win, but there's so many things that are good for you that may not be that outcome, that gold medal, that 200. And to maybe as a coach, another thing you can do is highlight other things that are going well that may not be the task or goal on paper. Because I think most people who go through college sports, what they probably love most about it is like the friendships along the way, the people you knew that you could count on. Like Braden, for sure, you playing football. Like, I mean, there's no bigger team sport that requires cohesion and camaraderie than when you're playing football where everyone is literally tasked to take your head off. Can I count on my O-line to protect my quarterback, right? Can I count on that guy out there being there to get the ball when I trust him that when I throw it there, he's going to be it? Can I trust the quarterback to throw the ball there? Because I'm going to run there. I'm risking my body to get hit, hoping that he gives me the ball, right? Wow. So when you leave that, you're like, so this is what trust feels like. I like this. I like this. Like when I have something I can depend on, this feels good. Like that's success. When you're 80, yeah, maybe you're like Rodney, who's like, I wish I squatted 3 instead of 2 on the 800. There's beasts like that, and that's his life. But then most of us are probably going to be 80 and be like, man, I'm so glad I went to the pack. It was just a gym where everyone was there to work out, and like those who stuck around, those are some like cool cats. You're like, it's a win. I don't even remember what I squatted on a good day. It didn't really matter. I remember overall, it was just a positive feeling. And for a coach to highlight some of the things that are going well that may not be readily obvious, I think can also help an athlete feel like something's going well. And sometimes it might be good to just acknowledge that it feels like crap. Yeah, like I know how it feels to not hit a PR. I know what it feels like to set a goal and not get there. It's okay. It happens. I know it sucks. And just acknowledge that it's real, because that's yet another way you normalize the athlete's experience. Because the last thing you want is to say, hey, don't worry about it. It's good. And you're like, wait, don't worry about it, because I'm feeling all this stuff on the inside that kind of tells me it's not okay. I'm feeling some fight or flight going on. Is something wrong with me? Because they said it's okay, but I don't feel like it's okay. Just even acknowledge, like, yeah, it sucks. It's normal. But
Yeah.
what can change? What, like the effort. And then you move on.
Yeah, definitely validating their feelings can be helpful for sure. That's a good reminder. But also just the whole piece about like whether or not you think you can do it, if you want to do it, you should try, and I mean, if you take your example, like if you Navio squatting 100 kilo wants to squat 200 kilo and you work your way up and get to 90, are you going to be pissed that you only squatted, or sorry, 190? Are you only going to be pissed that you squatted 190? Probably not. You'll probably be like, you'd be pumped. Like that's 90 kilo that I couldn't squat before, so you'll get a lot further trying than, saying that you can't do it and not trying.
Yeah. Actually, as talking to you guys, there's something else that came to mind too. Matt, like he's known as the father of management. His name's Peter Drucker, and he said, "We manage what we measure." So it highlights the importance of writing goals down. I think it also highlights the importance of tracking all indicators that matter for you. Like I remember I used to only track numbers on my lifting journal. Then I said, hey, that doesn't tell me enough of a story. I should at least give myself like, how many hours did you sleep last night? So I can kind of at least do a bit of a correlation in my head. I got 7 and didn't feel good. I got 8, it felt good. So that's an indicator to tell me I probably need to get more sleep, right? Or RPE for a weight. If that weight that is significantly lower than usual was RPE 9, then you worked. It's okay. There are going to be fluctuations in performance, just like there are fluctuations in our body weight and mood. Variation is like the only thing that's constant. But people seem to forget, especially when they're on these like highly competitive, difficult pursuits, that it's like you can only go up, right? Like there's only, it's linear and it can only go up. It's like, well, if it's only linear and it only goes up, then I don't think it'd be that interesting, because everybody can just squat 1,000 pounds. There's a reason only some people can, right? And you are just all along your journey at this segment. It's okay. But writing down these indicators, I think, also forces you to really think about what things matter to you. Like when we're talking about, hey, difficult specific goals, but they have to be important to you. And we only tend to do things that are important to us, even if the importance may change from day to day. But there are some things that probably are very, very consistent. and it's case by case by individual. But if you note that down, then you as a coach could also highlight, yes, maybe the numbers weren't good, but that looks pretty good here, right? These things that are also important to you, pretty solid. And then the conversation goes around not focusing purely on the thing that didn't go well, but also the things that did go well or are going well and or have gone well, and that actually are really important to you. So that's a win in my books. And then to say, well, great, we don't have to work on these things because they're solid. Let's work on this thing. Let's focus on the mechanism again. Let's look at why that might be happening. And then the beauty about sports performances, typically you're training 4 or 5 days a week, up to 7 if you include active recovery. You have a chance at improving on yourself every day in some way, shape, or form. It can be construed as incredibly challenging, but it is also an opportunity for you to look at all these levers or indicators that are important to you. All you have to do is just notch one of them, and you're already one step closer to your end goal than something that might take, so long and have very little opportunities for you to work on, for yourself. Sports is one of those things where you really have a chance to get after it every day, however that may be, whether that's just a walk, whether or not it's just some quick roll, quick stretch, pound a smoothie. That's my day. Like there's so much opportunities for you to change, and you're highlighting the effort, highlighting the mechanisms that you can change, and then measuring the things that are important to you to let you know when you are on track.
Yeah, that's a good point about like you can only manage what you measure, because if you aren't measuring something, like if you are only tracking, like I did this many sets of this many reps of this weight of this exercise, then if the number is not going up, then you have no idea if that's like if the number isn't going up, then all you can say is that you're not progressing, and you don't know why. You don't know what could be limiting you. But if you're measuring more things, then you have an idea, like, oh, okay, your food is terrible, you're not eating nearly enough, or you're not sleeping enough, or you're stressed all the time. And then you have more things that you can change. And if you have some idea of like the RPE as well, to your point, then you can say like, okay, this was a bad day where this was a really hard set, but if you look back 3 months ago, this weight was a really, really good day. So that's, yes, today was bad in comparison to last week maybe, but if you look at the trend, this is huge progress. And that if you don't have that data to pull from, then you don't have the insights. You can't paint that picture for the athlete.
Yeah.
So that's a good point to keep in mind for sure.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really important things that you can consider out of that. And again, I think it's a great takeaway, and in terms of deciding what's actually important to measure and what's to keep track of, because I know in some cases devices give you 9,000 different variables that it just spits out, right? If you use like a push band or something like that, it almost gives you more than you would ever need, and then doesn't even give you some things like you talked about, like how much sleep you're getting or what are you eating or things like that. So I think one of the benefits from that is you can have that, it opens the door to have the conversation with the people you work with about what do they think is important for their training, what do you think is important for their training, and gives you kind of a starting point to figure out some of those things. So I mean, again, like it's awesome to have, because you have the experience on like the research and the knowledge side of this topic and psychology and things like that. But then how can people who aren't experts in that realm kind of apply it in their everyday practices? I think that's another great example of how coaches and athletes, we can start to do some of these things and make it a daily habit of what we're doing.
Yeah, and we talked about so much. I think if we were to summarize it in a couple bullet points, I think the first thing is to note down what's important to you. And it could be the actual numbers, it could be other things. How will you know when you got those things? And it's just forcing yourself to look at ways to measure it. The numbers is easy. I'm writing down 90 kilos, writing down 100 kilos. But what about like, what was my mood that day? Like, does that matter? I think that's incredibly important, and it will heavily influence how an athlete does. And then highlighting finally the mechanisms or the effort or everything in between, the squishy middle that we kind of just seem to overlook, that are literally like the secret sauce to success. If not success in and of itself, is focusing on that squishy middle that we seem to just neglect often, and only look at the glory at the end, the gold medal at the end, and not realizing that those who are up there only are up there because of all the squishy middle in between. So it's what's important to you, how would you know when you've kind of progressed, and then what things you really can do to change it. I actually have a question for you guys as coaches. How often do you, or maybe others, or generally, kind of consider athletes' lives outside of the athletic arena, and how that may influence their performance that day or that year? And what other things might be important to them outside of athletics?
Every day. Every day. Especially with student athletes. They're in an extremely unpredictable world. And same with high school athletes. I think even more so because their whole world is more concentrated around school. So even just a small math quiz is the whole world to them. So you have to know how that kind of impacts them. So yeah, I would say every day. And even initially, I think sometimes people are surprised how little coaching I do in the first 3 or 4 weeks with an athlete when they're new. Because yeah, I'm just telling you to go out and do this thing. And I'm not overly concerned how you're doing it. I need to get to know you as a person. And then 4 months down the road, we can worry about, real finer details in your movements and what you're doing. But yeah, so I would say every day.
I would also say every day. Yeah, you need to be on top of it. Even just like how tired are they feeling today? How awake are they feeling today? Like when did they eat? I'm working with a kid right now who has diabetes. So like, what is his blood sugars like and that sort of thing. Yeah, what did you do on the weekend? What like how excited are you to train today? Like if you're not, we're not going to push it that hard if you're not going to be able to put in the effort for it, and exams and all that sort of stuff. With my powerlifters, I've actually built into my spreadsheet like a little rating thing for every time they work out. Before they work out, I want to know how like tired or sore they are, which is very like training variable. Life stress, so just generally, like, are you feeling like, is there family stuff going on, is there work stuff going on, is there relationship stuff going on, and then mindset towards training, like how is their mood essentially going into the session. And then when the athletes are good at filling in those things, then I can look back and like, oh, okay, this was a really, really stressful week for you, so I'm not surprised that your RPs on everything were way higher than I expected. And it can kind of be like a backwards correlating kind of thing. But I like it as a tool to help them be more in tune with how they're feeling and not just focusing on their performance. And if they don't perform as well as they hope, they can be like, oh, well, I mean, I legitimately thought before the session that I wasn't feeling that good. So it's reasonable that I didn't perform that well,
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome to hear. And maybe I'm biased as not a psychologist, that's a protected term, but being a researcher in psychology. But I believe at the core of everything you do are people. And when you have the people element taken care of, it's almost like the other things just happen as a byproduct. Oversimplifying. But you deal with the mood, you deal with the stresses, you deal with the mindset and the struggle of juggling multiple things at one go, all while in pursuit of something that really should take up your whole life. Like dealing with those human elements helps with how they can actually then bring themselves to go train when they don't want to, or when they don't feel so good. So that's like really, really good to hear, and probably why we're friends, because I'm not convinced that that is the norm. Maybe limited with time, resources, that you can only focus so much. So I'm only going to deal with the thing that, is probably in theory the most important. and probably someone that has the most expertise, which is on the training side. But hopefully what we're trying to do today in the last episode is just to bring in some of those elements, bring them to life a little bit. And they are fairly simple yet powerful things you can do to at least start to get at that human side or the psychological side of training.
Definitely some of my clients that have come from other coaches or from other coaches have said that it's not necessarily the norm. So it's nice to be able to provide that for sure. Another thing is we're talking about the process. Another thing that helps people get through the squishy middle of everything is the music that they're listening to along the way.
Oh, for sure. 100%.
So Navio, I was wondering if you've still been listening to Dean Brody or
Please say no.
Or a different country artist, maybe.
So there is another country artist. Her name is Ingrid Andress. I think she's from the States. I'm not sure like where exactly. And her music doesn't sound like your typical country. It's often a little bit more ballady, so it's slower. So I saw some top comment on a song that said like, the song I play when the homies aren't around. It's like this song. Yeah. So stuff like that. So I really like her, but that's definitely not for training. That's definitely usually me if it's a day like today, kind of sunny here, I'll probably throw on some Ingrid if I'm taking a drive down around Stratford.
It's a good answer. I like that answer a lot. I haven't heard of her before, but I like that Tommy's upset about it.
I was hoping it was going to be something other than country.
I think I'm just going to keep looking for country artists just to mess with Tommy.
Yeah.
My favorite genre of all time, country. Love it.
What are you listening to, Tom?
We recorded a little bit earlier in the week, but I have shifted gears a little bit. I've hopped back on the Metallica train. I know they sometimes get a really, really tough go because they're the most popular and successful metal band of all time, but sometimes you just need to go back and listen to those original albums they put out in the 80s where just there's nothing like it that's ever been written in the metal genre. And yeah, they had some terrible albums in the 90s and they made up for it with their recent albums, but I think any metalhead has to go back and listen to those first 3 or 4 albums that Metallica put out. And so that's what I was doing as I was working out and just doing nothing around the house. So
very nice. Yeah, we did record very recently. So I talked about a couple of songs on that one. That episode will be coming out in the future. So this is backwards for the audience, but I did find a good pop rock playlist on Spotify that was in the same vein as that song by Olivia Rodrigo, and that song was also on the playlist, which was nice. So I did get more of that fix, even if it was variable artists instead of just what she had to offer. So
is that playlist called Pop Punk Powerhouse?
No.
I think you would like that playlist.
I'll check that one out next time I train. Because I did find, like, I did try to listen to one pop punk thing, but it wasn't quite what I was looking for. The pop rock one was nice, but I'll check that out for sure. Right on. Well, thanks for coming along again, Navio.
Dude, it was awesome to have you for both these episodes. Really appreciate you taking the time. I've learned a lot, and it was great to catch up.
Yeah, I'm glad I got to come on again, and I would be happy to do it again anytime. Hopefully in person, Tommy.
Welcome. Sorry?
Hopefully in person.
Oh, for sure. 100%. We'll make it happen.
I was gonna say we might have to do that soon because we didn't get to everything that we had prepared for today. So
that's okay.
Yeah,
that was great. It was a great conversation as always, of course. So Navio, again, where can people find you if they want to chat about some of this stuff?
IG Smooth Navigator.
Very good. And then Speed Strength Performance for Tommy, Braden Southern for myself, and Speed Strength Show for the show. Yeah, that was the Speed Strength Show. Thanks for coming along, world.
We'll see you next time.
Peace.